So in Dragon Ball Super episode 127, we finally had light shed on Jiren's backstory. And after the longest time of wondering who he is as a character, what his motivations are, and what drove him to become so strong, we finally have our answer. As it was revealed by Belmod, when Jiren was a child, he came home one day to find that his village had been attacked and his family had been killed by an evildoer. Jiren would be rescued by the man who would become his teacher, and as a result dedicated himself and his life to mastering strength and following the right path. And in doing so, he formed a team of fighters to fight beside him. However, the evildoer would eventually return, and despite Jiren fighting alongside his team, the attempt to defeat the evildoer failed, and nearly all of his fighters, including Jiren's master, were killed. And after this happened, the surviving students stopped supporting Jiren. This is when, while Jiren was abandoned, he threw aside his ideals of trust and came to believe that only strength, and strength absolute, was true justice. Eventually, Jiren went on to become the powerful being he is in Super, and used the team of the Pride Troopers in order to attain his wish with the Super Dragon Balls. So with this being said, is this backstory actually good? And was it really worth the wait? Well, looking at it, it isn't really the most original backstory, and watching it, I did feel like it was a backstory I had already seen a number of times before, be it in Naruto, Hunter x Hunter, Yu Yu Hakusho, and a number of other stories. This sort of backstory has been told time and time again. Much like with Batman, the story of an evildoer who kills the protagonist's family when they are a child, and then they go on to attain the strength either for revenge or justice, has been told time and time again. So when we apply it to Jiren, the main antagonist of our current arc, it seems just a little underwhelming. On one hand, I'm grateful that we actually did get some backstory, but on the other, this is the main antagonist and the final boss, so to speak, in the seemingly final arc of Dragon Ball Super as a series. And after waiting all of these episodes with Jiren basically just standing around, and with us getting very little information about him as a character, to then find out that Jiren's tragic backstory is basically the same we've heard many times before in other series, is definitely disappointing. And really, this just makes Jiren feel even more generic as a character, as not only is his design generic and his personality generic, but now so is his backstory. And the part specifically about casting aside emotion seems like a convenient excuse for him showing little personality throughout the arc. Now, in terms of Jiren's overall character, I will say that the backstory achieved some of its goal. It gave him some more depth and made me care a little more about him as a character, and his potential wish is something that could be of interest. And of course, there is still a bit of mystery and ambiguity that they left open about who this evildoer was that killed Jiren's family, and if they were defeated by him. However, when it comes to telling the backstory of the main antagonist, you typically don't wait this long to tell that story unless there is some big dramatic twist that occurred within it. And if you do wait to tell the full story, you usually give your audience a lot more to care about with the character before we get to this point. Whereas with Jiren, we haven't really gotten much information about his background and backstory until this point. So what we're left with is learning Jiren's story, which isn't really that big of a dramatic twist, and only a few episodes before the arc comes to its conclusion, when really it might have made more sense to put this much earlier on in the arc. So while we can retroactively apply some of this information to him throughout the arc, it might not necessarily help the rewatch value. And with so little time remaining in the tournament, it seems like it may be too little too late. I think a great comparison to draw between characters would have to be between Jiren and younger Toguro from Yu Yu Hakusho. Toguro was also a stoic character who was portrayed as the strongest and stood on the sidelines for much of the Dark Tournament. However, Toguro was given a lot throughout the arc to make us care about him as a character. There was not only his relationship with Yusuke, but also his long-standing relationship with Genkai, both of which were strong themes themes throughout the arc. The audience was also given bits of information about him as a character throughout the arc, showing how he still had his own sort of code, disagreed with some of the evil acts of those surrounding him, and truly wanted to fight and be defeated at his full power. And just like with Jiren, Toguro also had his own tragic backstory, in which his students were killed by a demon named Chiron. And once Toguro won the Dark Tournament and in the process killed Chiron, the wish he made was to have a powerful body much like the demon that destroyed his students. So the power that Toguro acquired was in and of itself tragic, and served as some sort of self-inflicted punishment. And so much of this depth that was in Toguro as a character is simply not found in Jiren. If anything, Jiren's story and character feels like more of a generic knockoff of Toguro, only Toriyama didn't develop him anywhere near as much as Togashi did with Toguro, which I guess comparing their works isn't really that big of a surprise. And considering how late this was revealed, I have to wonder if this backstory was even in Toriyama or the writers' minds until recently. So ultimately, I'm happy that Jiren got some sort of backstory, as it does help him as a character and make him feel less boring overall, but was it actually a good backstory? Right now, I'd say it's passable, but nothing spectacular. And perhaps in the small amount of time we have left, we'll learn even more about Jiren as a person, and his story may become even more dynamic. But I guess we'll find out as Dragon Ball Super comes to its conclusion.
Yeah, and you better subscribe, enable those damn notifications.